let's start. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Karina Guevara, and I'm here on behalf of Serbia Global. Serbia Global is a company that helps hire and manage global talent and ease through our employer record, services, and more. Today's session is something fresh and powerful. We're diving into the human side of global leadership with a session called Leading with Dynamic Balance, Mastering Leadership Across Culture and Conditions. Our guest speaker, Luca Gandino, brings us a unique perspective drawn from both global business experience and the discipline of martial arts champion. His business black belt method helps leaders develop clarity, build trust across culture, and lead with energy and intentions, no matter where their teams are in the world. Luca Gandino is the founder of Business Black Belt BBB Methodology, a unique approach that blends corporate leadership with the timeless principles of martial arts. Over his impressive career, Lucas held executive roles at global companies like Fiat, Philip Morris, JLL, and Swedish Match, working across 12 countries and driving intercultural collaboration with the highest level. But Lucas' leadership isn't just defined by boardrooms. He's also an Italian Muay Thai champion and multi-medalist in Jiu-Jitsu. Oh, that's so cool. Jiu-Jitsu. His experience in martial arts brings a rare depth of his approach, emphasizing adaptability, presence, and resilience. In 2016, he launched the BBB Method, a framework that helps organizations operate with more clarity, efficiency, and cultural intelligence. He's also the author of Business Black Belt and passionate university lecturer, inspiring the next generation of global leaders. So with that, let's get started. Luca, welcome, and we're excited to learn from you today.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction. Perhaps before we get into this first topic that we want to talk about, which is leading across cultures with dynamic balance, and what dynamic balance is, let me just add a little bit, a couple of words about the methodology. So the first thing which I'd say, which is not a regret or not a problem, but what I say is that unfortunately, I am the brand of the methodology because I did launch it initially thinking about creating some kind of franchise business where this methodology could be expanded and taken all over the world. But unfortunately, despite me not being, let's say, Bruce Lee or Elon Musk, at the end of the day, I am the one who has done and who has united these two worlds of mine. And unfortunately, as there are much better martial artists than I am and much better international executives than I am, I have yet to meet somebody that has blended the two things together in a real proper methodology that is not just, you are stronger than you think you are, and this kind of what I call blah, 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 So this is actually a very concrete methodology. I developed this methodology thinking of what I would have liked when I was CEO for big international companies, like you had the favor of introducing me. And what I would have liked to see. So I developed this from the user end, let's say. That's why I initially wrote my book, Business Black Belt. And then I started lecturing universities, including in Mexico, for example, at the IPADE, and in Russian, in two different universities, one state university, one private university. All are business MBAs. And from there, I started to develop actually this methodology. As you can see, the methodology has basically 5 steps, which are awareness, strategy, change, focus, and then expansion. So by awareness, what I mean is that what I would have liked as a CEO, especially when you're leading international teams, yes, we might all speak English very well, but perhaps in Mexico, in Japan, and in Italy, the same word, the same concept, because of our cultural background and because of our past experiences, they might actually have different interpretations. So there's only one way to understand that we're speaking the same language. And that's not the fact that we all speak English quite well, or whatever the official language of a big corporation might be, but that it's more that we understand the same things in the same way, so that we're all going towards the same direction and we're not running like, chickens without head. So in the first phase, in the awareness phase, this is exactly what we try to do. We assess with individual self-assessments, which normally are done in a anonymous way, so people can actually be very open to what they interpret as being adversities and problems, or which they think are the main targets of the company from here to the next 5 months or 5 years. What are the missing links in synergies between amongst international teams, and also how they value and what weight they give to the stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean the market. Yes, so it can be companies and products in the markets that are competing with us, or it can also be internal competition. So I might be marketing, you might be production, and we need to understand each other, and we need to understand where we want to go and what are the roles of both. So that's the awareness part, where I try to create and understand the gaps of understanding between the leadership and the people, let's say, under them, and where we're going, and do we interpret these directions in the same way. From there, what we're trying to do is to create the premises for the next part, which is the strategy. And by strategy is we try to categorize specific challenges. So we categorize them in four main categories, which are adversities or problems. And problems are not, I am not reaching my targets, but are places where I have placed a lot of money, resources, and time, and I made the problem worse rather than better. Okay, so those are the adversities. Then, of course, specific targets. I don't know, I have a product, which might be this product, and I need to sell more, exactly this much more in this area with these resources, with these people. So the more specific you are, the better it is. And then, of course, team, which means trying to find synergies, especially in international teams. And especially, I work a lot with companies that expand via acquisition. So they need to find some kind of synergies between different teams, different modus operandi. And then at the end, the market, or what I was talking about before, stakeholders. Yes, market can be the external market, so the marketplace, and the internal market. From there, we try to recreate four main questions in each one per category, in order to see how well aligned these people are, how well aligned the cultures are, and the different parts of the companies and the units are. And we create a strategy. And in this phase, that's where I recreate in my mind how they can actually approach this as a real fight. So my whole methodology is taking two of my experiences as an executive and as a martial artist. I've done it at least 500 or 600 times since the beginning, since 2016. Nobody has ever got hurt. You never touch yourselves among yourselves. It's always with my experts. So I bring experts all over the world. We operate all over the world. So I have people in Mexico, in the US, so we can travel through Latam. I have people in Italy where we can travel through Europe. Same thing I have for Russia from Asia. Uh, and so basically, we transform your challenges, these four main challenges, as if they were a fight, as if they were a battle. Okay, and you need to approach this battle in a dynamic way. This is where we talk about dynamic balance. Yes. Jigoro Kano, which is the founder of judo, probably you heard the martial arts judo. His famous phrase is minimum effort, maximum results. Okay, but in order to understand this, we need to understand this strength and flexibility, which are words that we use every day in the business world, but actually come from the martial arts world. But we need to understand, what do we mean by strength and flexibility? How do they look, and when should they be used? So this is what I'm trying to do, and this is the phase of change, the third phase. So what we do is actually we gather these teams, and we can mix them up. They can be homogeneous teams, or they can be mixed teams, and they have to face their problems. So there are four business challenges, as we said, as if they were battles. And normally the whole approach is made by a lose, analyze, win, reanalyze. So first of all, me and my team will make sure that regardless of how strong you are and how well prepared you are physically, you will lose that for initial battle. Okay. And you will lose, and then we will analyze why you lost. So in loss, there's a lesson to learn. Okay. And then as you analyze that, I'm going to give you up to 32 principles of martial arts, which I have identified in 50 years of martial arts, which are principles that can be applied to any martial arts, including regular English boxing, for example, or even fencing. And they are actually transportable or transformed into metaphors, which can then be applied to the business world. So we actually analyze of the 32, maybe in one day, we might analyze 20, 25. Uh, and we extrapolate these principles in order to create concrete solutions to concrete problems that we have analyzed during the awareness and strategy phase. After that, there's the focus phase, which is the fourth part. And in the focus phase is a real one-to-one executive coaching that I give. So let's say that normally my sessions have between 40 to 50 people. It can be a little bit more, but this is normally the amount of people I have. So then I have to organize with 40 or 50 different agendas, and these agendas to have a one-to-one session, which can be anonymous or not anonymous. And then from here, we try to understand what exactly have they learned, how they are applying what they learned, what principles they are applying to their business challenges of every day, and how this is affecting their everyday life and their levels of stress. Because what we teach is to face things in order to maximize the amount of stress, not avoid it, but maximizes, but deal with it in a very calm and constructive way. And then, okay, the last phase, of course, the expand phase is just once we have gone to that, we can decide if we want to expand to different themes, different units, or different geographies. Yes, so I work with the international groups. So maybe I might start, for example, in Switzerland, and then they might ask me to go to Australia to do the same thing. So that's more of the expansion phase. Uh, so we're aiming for better efficiencies and helping people grow without stress. But this must mean that we understand what our common adversities are. Yes, our common adversities, our common targets, our common synergies, and what are the stakeholders. Now, let me tell you an interesting story to bring this a little bit to concrete of how I would have liked to have this methodology. About Mexico and Russia, the cultural differences. I actually give a lesson, a lecture of this to the IPADE in Mexico. It's about what I call is the principle of reconnaissance. So it's basically like when airplanes go and take pictures and understand the geography before the other smaller planes go and bomb wherever they have to bomb. Yeah, so they do some reconnaissance before to understand what is happening. And for example, if you take the year it was 2012, I was running a big Italian part of the Fiat group, Comau. I was running both Mexico and Russia at the same time. So I was CEO for Mexico and CEO for Russia at the same time. And it was very interesting because every time I was flying, I was spending sometimes 15 days in Mexico, 15 days in Moscow, then back maybe 1 month in Mexico, then maybe 2 days in Moscow and back in Mexico, and so on. I remember I was changing the chip. This is why I call this lesson "Change Your Chip." So I was changing the GSM of the phone. So I was coming to Mexico. There were no eSIMs at the time. So I was changing the physical GSM. And I remember that I was trying to think into my head that I had to change my mentality when I was coming to Mexico or when I was going to Russia, my leadership mentality. Okay. So how do you balance these very different, apparently they might be similar to Europeans because they're both far away, but they couldn't be more different. So for example, you being Mexican yourself, you might know that in Mexico there's a style of management which I would say it's more indirect, and which is completely opposite than Russia. So how does this look? Okay, for example, in Mexico, let's say I had 7 to 8 direct reports. I had about 1,000 people, a company with 1,000 people, but I had 7 to 8 reports. So what happens if in Mexico you, Karina, you make a mistake, and I point out your mistake in front of the other direct reports? You will probably just shut up, but then the vengeance will come in a very subtle and backwards way. Yes, so I gain nothing by exposing your mistake. The best way to do that in Mexico is most likely to let you expose it, finish the meeting, take you aside, and talk to you one to one. That you will respect, that you will understand, and you will apply yourself to become a better employee or a better direct report, and not make that mistake again. Why? Because I followed your culture. Okay. Now, if I do the same exact approach in Russia, I will get the complete opposite. So in Russia, perhaps you don't know, but Russians love to be extremely confrontational. And this is not a negative thing. That is actually how they take out the best of people. So if I was in Russia and I had the same problem with you, Karina, but you were Russian, I would have to point out your mistake in front of everybody. Because if I do it by ourselves, you will take that as weakness. You will take that as the fact that I was not ready to be confronted by you. Yes, because the opposite of Mexico, you would not confront me if I'm your boss, and I treat you harshly. You would probably be quiet and then be very angry about it later. In Mexico, you would confront me extremely harshly. Yes. And I need to confront that in front of everybody. That's the only way to have a team that is cohesive, is to create this confrontation. So they're very different styles. I would say that this is it's a fairly interesting approach that global leaders need to have. They need to understand, they need to do some reconnaissance, which is basically provoking a little bit, making small steps and understanding how the people react. The best way is to appoint somebody who already knows a culture. But in order to know a culture, you need to either be born there or have the great luck and chance that I have had, to live 12, 13 years in Mexico, 15, 18 years in Russia, and so on. But otherwise, there's no other way to understand that. Yes. So as you see here, we're already applying, for example, just to this little story, at least three concepts, yes, which is the reconnaissance concept, the prevention concept. So I want to prevent um having a non-cohesive team, but then the tension of also the tension principle, which is I need to create the right amount of tension to understand what works in what culture. This is not very easy to do. You need to break your own brain. That's why I say you need to change your chip like you do with a phone in order to have the right kind of wavelength that you have with the people that you are uh, having to work with. So this is a little bit about what I would say balancing strength and flexibility across the borders means. Yes. Yeah. So the next here we go to the next theme, which is efficiency as an art, doing more with less. This is one of my favorite ones. Uh, Sometimes doing nothing intentionally is the most powerful action that you can do. Okay. I I have a I have a student. I also teach in a school. I do it almost for free, basically, but I like that. I teach anti-bullying based on martial arts for small kids. Yes, from 4 to 10, and I have this little Chinese boy, and sometimes when I scold him, he just goes quiet, looks at me, doesn't cry. He looks at me and goes quiet. But I know he's actually thinking, should I answer? Should I not answer? He's actually thinking. So what I call that is I call that intentional doing nothing intentionally. Yes. So that's a very smart approach sometimes. If you can compare this to martial arts, for example, especially we are all familiar, even if we don't know what is going on. We're all familiar with the mixed martial arts, or what in America is called UFC, yes, in this cage fighting. So we see that they're kicking and punching, and then sometimes they go to the ground. And when they go to the ground, for the non-expert eye, it might look like it's like two guys or two girls just hugging each other. But that couldn't be further from the truth. That is what I call the invisible jujitsu, okay? And that is actually full of nuances between resting, small strategic repositioning of your body and the angles of your body, and also dynamic planning in that stalling moment. It's a dynamic planning to understand what you're going to do next, and that can change actually, because A fight is dynamic, so it can change all the time. And let me tell you, there's a lot of companies, international companies, that now implement this concept of efficiency as an art and doing more with less, but better, uh, as actually as a policy, okay? Where they understand that efficiency is not just about speed, it's about flow. I introduced in my methodology this concept of intentional inaction, which is as a concept is basically stepping back to reflect and recover or reframe. But there are, as I was saying, there's companies, international companies that do that intentionally as a policy. Uh, let's take, for example, Steve Jobs, one of the most famous guys ever, yes, and one of the most famous product ever, the iPhone. If you really think about it, he took his idea of Apple as they're minimal. They try to keep things simple. Uh, to cutting edge products like the iPhone. Before the iPhone, all phones were getting more and more complicated. They were opening this way, that way, different kind of buttons, different kind of things. He actually took everything off. He just plain, simple screen. There's nothing simple about it, but there is simplicity. Yes. So he did a lot more because now you basically renew your phone. You can there's a new version, there's a new app, there's a new so you can do much more with less. That's probably one of the best examples, but there's more. For example, Toyota production system. It's called the MUDA. MUDA meaning waste. So they value in doing what is unnecessary, not doing what is unnecessary. Okay, so unnecessary steps, unnecessary stress, unnecessary working hours for the employees. These are all part of the Toyota production system. So the minimum waste possible that does not add value to a product. I can give more examples. For example, Netflix. Netflix has the culture deck idea, which is an emphasis on freedom and responsibility, trusting that people will not act when they don't need to act. Actually, in Netflix, they do not have vacation times. You take vacation when you need it. You don't even need to tell them that you're on vacation. If you're not doing something, it means that you should not be doing it. Yes. So that's a very high level trust culture that can actually create this efficiency, doing more with less. So I have my own examples of companies that I've worked with, for example. I have a team that in Italy, working, well, actually, it's a Swedish company working in Italy. And in Sweden, there's a tendency to have a lot of meetings. There's a tendency also to have responsibility spread out to more people rather than one centralized point of responsibility, like in other cultures, which are more typical of Latin America or even the United States, where there's a more hierarchical kind of organization. And doing this and applying this concept of intentional inaction, they removed 40% of their standing meetings. And actually, it's a technological company. They actually rose in innovation. Why? Because they realized that they were having these meetings in order not for the meeting itself, but to keep spreading responsibility and actions around. And there was really no need, because it was in a culture where the responsibility is spread around so much. There's really no need to have so many meetings. So they actually reduced 40% of the meetings by increasing actually the level of innovation. So I actually asked the audience to consider this. What is the one thing that you're doing now that if you stop doing would actually improve your efficiency? I'm sure that you can find some kind of meeting, some kind of thing, some kind of repetitive thing that you do that if you would stop doing, it would actually help be more efficient than not. I think maybe we can even go to the next one. Yeah. So regarding transformational stories from the BBB method, I have a lot, but I have one that I love particularly, and not because not because you guys are from Mexico, but let me take you back to Mexico in the early days of business black belt, with an international group in the industrial sector, which was aiming at increasing value for the client, given that they were competing around the world with Chinese products all over the world. And they had to offer something else that was not just price. Okay. So I worked with them the full cycle, the five steps. So we addressed the gaps and so on. And it was funny because for the first time, I actually introduced a simulation of battles from Napoleon Bonaparte, in particular the Battle of Austerlitz from 1805, where Napoleon defeated the much bigger and larger Russian Austrian army with fewer troops, but he used some martial arts and battle principles, which is deception, mastery of the terrain, and timing. Okay, and so of course he pretended to have weakness in order to get the enemy to move in a certain geographical location where he knew he had advantage. He actually said this famous phrase of him: "Let them come to me, I will break their spine." Okay, and it's funny because the company then readopted my internal language, so my uh, principles, the name of the 32 principles, and the specific moves that they were taught during the methodology, and they readopted the internal language of the company at international level. And that was funny because it would be interesting. They would actually send me short video clips of internal meetings that they were having, where they were using words, such as kimura, kuzuchi, terrain mastery, deception, reconnaissance, and they were using these words as a skeleton for planning their next moves and for their meetings that they were planning. So it's actually interesting to see these transformation moments when they take the theory, yes, the strategy that we've been designing with them and their bosses and their HR team, and then we apply it to the company itself.
Okay. Thank you, Luca, for that. It was really interesting hearing you talk. I mean, I took some notes on my.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, let's start the question and answers. I don't know if someone from the audience wants to send some questions throughout the chat. If not, I on myself have some questions that I would really like to ask you, Luca. So in the meantime, the people start getting having a little bit more of trust in sending of information. Okay, let me start for myself. Is there a specific turning point or mindset shift you see again and again in the leaders who successfully implement the BBB method?
Uh, yes, this is when they go from the strategy phase to the change phase. Yes, so from phase number 2 to phase number 3. What happens is that, of course, we do the assessment, so that's personal and individual. But then when we start putting together a strategy, what we're going to do, how we're going to face these challenges, how we're going to transform them into a fight for people that do not know how to fight. And something very important that I didn't say, we have had all types of people. So my methodology is extremely inclusive. You don't have to be good looking, you don't have to be skinny, fat, big, strong, tall, short. It doesn't matter. It's applicable for everybody. My experts are the ones that understand your physicality and understand how much pressure they can apply for you to learn the lesson and apply the principle. It's not a matter of real fighting. It's applying certain principles. So what happens is that during the design phase, if they haven't done it before, they really don't understand why I go so much in detail and try to understand in the 4 phases, if you remember: adversities, targets, teamwork, and market. I try to understand all the problems because I try to recreate a fight or a part of a fight that represents that. Okay, and the most interesting part is when they come and they actually face that and they see that every single move that they make has an intention. There's nothing left to chance. That's why I say it's learning how to respond versus reacting. Your body reacts in a certain way. Your mind can actually train your body to react in a way that is not natural, but it's actually efficient. Okay, so I see their eyes. Oh, it's what I call the aha moment. Yeah, it's like, oh, I get it now, and that's fantastic, especially when I can have the let's say the boss of whatever team I have. Maybe I have a team of 40, 50 people, and their boss is there. I see that they actually are finally looking at the same problem and speaking the same language. I love that moment. It happens all the time.
Yeah, you did mention that part. I mean that
Yeah,
understanding the culture, understanding the environment is really essential. In the examples that you gave up about Mexico and Russia, it's really clear on that part. So thanks for that part. And other another question is, how can leaders recognize when they're over adapting to a new culture, potentially losing their sense of direction?
I don't believe that is the real problem. I think the problem lays deeper or at a higher level. Where certain things are expected from HQ, so our headquarters, which might be in another country. We're talking about, leading in a global environment. Okay, uh, I would say that uh, so you need to adapt as much as possible actually to a culture. I think there is no too much adaptation. Yes. Even though maybe I might be wrong, that's why ambassadors they change every 4 or 5 years. That's why general managers they change every 4 or 5 years. That is there is an element probably that is true, but I think it's more important for you to not lose the initial part of your culture rather than adopting the new one. So you might become so Mexican, yes, that if you're working for a Swedish or German company, you might stop being German, yes, and that is more of the problem than becoming too Mexican. Yes, if you're working in Mexico, at the end of the day, it's better to become more Mexican than less. The thing is that you are the filter, you are the translator of what is happening and why it's happening towards headquarters. So I think that the balance here is not becoming too much of a new culture, is not losing your original culture and being able to still translate what is happening.
Yes, I do understand that part. Right now, working as an ER company, before this, I used to work in um, a cardboard box company that was like simple, just focus on Mexican culture and that's all. Moving on to an ER company, you actually have to learn how other cultures require the service. For example, you have to be that USA, England, they want the information as soon as possible. Mexican is okay. I can wait for the information. I can wait on that. So, as you mentioned, we do have to like adapt our main way of thinking to each of the cultures that we have to be we're interacting with, and as well to the companies that where they want us to interact with. For example, if we have to make understand our clients in the USA that it's not the same culture for someone that it's going to be working in Colombia, that someone's going to be working in Australia, that someone's going to be working in Russia. So as you mentioned, it is we do have to, as your service, we do have to like move between cultures a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, yeah. But then, for example, if you take going back to what you were saying there, I remember actually when I was working and I was using your services, and I had people going from Mexico to the U.S. Uh, when you take, for example, Mexicans and you take them to the U.S. or somewhere else, they become extremely more efficient than if it was the other way around. If you take Americans and you bring them to Mexico, they kind of get lost in the Mexican culture, and they don't, because Americans are extremely individualistic. I don't say this as a negative thing, but it's true. They kind of flow in the problem alone, even if it's a team of 5 or 6 people. Do the same thing with Mexicans going there in the US. They actually help each other a lot. I remember I was sending Mexicans to the US, and some of them they didn't even speak English. But I knew that once they were there, the other Mexicans, they would help them lift them up. Something that in Mexico would not happen. I've heard many times in Mexico, the worst enemy of a Mexican is another Mexican. No, so but when you move them outside, that dynamic changes completely. So that's something that you need to understand.
Yes, as you mentioned, basically, if you take someone and move them to a different culture, they will try to adapt and to have that warmth with
Not always.
people. Well, sometimes. Talking about Mexicans.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Exactly.
They're very flexible in that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. What's one common mistake leaders make when trying to motivate remote teams, especially when managing across time zones and cultures? Something.
I would say that they confuse more communication with better communication. One needs to understand that a culture and what motivates it to take responsibility. Yes, at the end of the day, it's all about taking responsibilities. There are cultures that have more adversity to responsibility within a few people, and like I was saying before, the difference between for example, Sweden and the US. So I would say. You said what's one common mistake? Yeah, that's the mistake. It's over communication rather than having good communication. But also I would say don't be afraid. So if you take a good person who knows the culture, he should not be afraid to change a new team, even to fire, rehire, reshuffle, change. He should not be afraid, as long as he knows the culture. Okay, I would rather be more afraid of placing somebody in charge of a set of countries that he does not know well culturally, rather than a guy who knows them well and all of a sudden he changes the team, because it might be that certain teams need a shock therapy. So I would say that in order to then not over communicate but have a team that is strong, that is cohesive, that is running towards the same concepts and targets, don't be afraid to change them. Be afraid to appoint the wrong person in charge of them.
Yeah, that is true. I understand, for example, that in the martial arts or basically in most sports, there's always like every movement that you do is it has to be done to succeed on something. And as you mentioned right now, I mean, talking more or having a lot of reunions or meetings with people, it doesn't mean that it's being efficiently used. So
Absolutely.
one of the things that you mentioned a lot of in some examples is that sometimes the most simple things are the things that actually give you the best results. And
Absolutely.
and I
Well,
mean,
we know there's the principle of Pareto, the
mm,
Pareto principles, yeah, the 80-20. So normally 20% of your work is going to give you 80% of your income. So this concept of, working very hard is not always true. You need to work efficiently. Sometimes doing less is actually doing more. You're muted. Can't hear you.
oh yeah, sorry, thank you. Yes, exactly. And I mean, as you mentioned, this doesn't just apply just to sports, to anything. I mean, this applies everywhere. And based
Absolutely.
on that is, can you think about an experience in your team where you have recognized that leaking and that doing something that is you said repeatedly is actually not working, or it's something that has been challenging the actual workflow of your process?
Perhaps not much in my team of today, but years ago, we're talking about early 2000s. No, actually, 2015, maybe. No, 2005. I'm sorry, 2005, 2006 in Russia. I was working for a Swedish company, and we had a particular deal that was very big, very important, and so again, I was younger, and I had experience. I was managing director for Russia, but uh, my, let's call them like this, bosses came down. This was a very important deal, very big money. And when we met with this client, they came out of the meeting. When I say they, I mean my bosses came out of the meeting. They were ready to pop the champagne, and they thought everything went very well. And me knowing the culture, I'm like, no, this did not go well, actually. So I think that I spent the next 2 months trying to convince my bosses that they were wrong, that uh, this was not going well. The It was not a done deal. There was nothing signed. The ball was on our court, and we had to manage it in a very good way. And there was nothing was assured. I would actually say that our chances were much smaller than the chances of winning. And I spent so much energy, but there's again, I was in the middle. I knew one culture and I kind of knew the other culture, so my boss's cultures. And sometimes, like you do with your own team or even with your own children, let's say, you need to make them fall, you need to make them learn. Sometimes you need to make people learn who are above you. You know, I shouldn't have. I lost so much energy doing that that it was absolutely not worth it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's where you, well, when you're not on the top, or when the leaders do not hear you up, that's when you say, why am I wasting my time if no one's going to hear out? So yeah. And well,
Correct.
I don't and one last question from my side. I don't, since I don't see any more questions from our audience. Which part of the BBB method most resonates with your current leadership challenges?
Well, okay. I have a concept. I have a concept which is called buoyancy. You know, the more buoyants are those big balls in the sea, which are chained to a base in the ocean, and they just, they stay there to signal boats that there might be danger there. Yes, but buoyancy means that basically what they're doing is that they're staying there and they're floating and they're waiting. Yes, so I would say that. Uh, that's uh, that's what I like teaching the most, because as I said before, there are times where inaction is action. And right now I have other businesses, which is not just business black belt. I have another business when I'm not operational, but I am a 50% um, uh, let's say joint partner. And right now, we made a lot of investments. We took new people. We changed the methodology. We did different things. So now is the time for buoyancy. We need to wait for things to happen. We already did things, yes. So now we need to make them happen. We need to wait for them to happen. So that's one of the most difficult things that I find still today. Is to not do anything. Just wait for things to happen.
Yeah, exactly. We have to wait until we actually start seeing results, even if it's for a win or it's for a lose. And if it's for a loss, you know that there's still something that you need to change.
Yes, there's a concept even more. Another principle which I say tag along, and basically is in fighting. Sometimes when you, especially in judo, when you throw somebody on the ground, there's a point where they're actually losing balance, and you can actually grab their kimono or grab them, and they help you come down with them. So you're actually letting them bring you down. Okay. So what happens is that you created a move, but then you need to wait for that move to be in your favor and actually do nothing. Just let it happen. So it's you tag along and you go with them.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, great. I'm gonna start seeing no judo as well. Well, for my side, I think that's all. I don't know if you have any additional comments before we wrap up this session.
I'm very glad I had this conversation with you guys. It actually even makes me look at what I do with a different eyes. Uh, and I guess that if there's any questions from the audience, even later, they can contact me. They can write to me. They can find me on LinkedIn. I don't have social media. That's one of my maybe flaws. I don't like Instagram. I don't like Facebook. I should have somebody do it for me, but I really don't like them. So I only use LinkedIn, which is more, let's say, professionally guided. But you can find me there. You can contact me there if there's questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. We'll be sharing your information again throughout our platforms, and I want to thank everyone who was able to join us today, and as well, we'll be sending out this web seminar to everyone that was registered wasn't able to log in with us. And of course, it's a huge thank you to you, Luca, for inspiring and for having this practical session with us. At Serbia, we support companies around the world and build high performing global teams. And what we heard today is really a powerful reminder that global leadership isn't just about hiring, it's about how we lead, how we connect, and how we grow together. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help companies expand internationally, feel free to reach out to us directly. And thank you again for your time. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you. See you in Mexico.
See you in Mexico. Bye.
Hasta luego.